The desert was eerily quiet after the explosion, the only sound the faint whistle of the wind sweeping across the barren landscape. Daniel, Claire, and Terran stood at the edge of the ruins, their faces streaked with dirt and exhaustion. The base was gone, reduced to a pile of twisted metal and shattered concrete. But the question lingered in the air. Had they truly stopped Sarlon? "I don't see him," Claire whispered, her voice tense as she scanned the rubble. "But that doesn't mean he's dead." Terran nodded grimly. "Sarlon is not so easily defeated. If even a fragment of him survived, he will find a way to return." Before anyone could respond, a low groan echoed from the wreckage. The group froze, their eyes darting toward the source of the sound. Slowly, a figure emerged from the debris, his massive frame battered but intact. Sarlon staggered forward, his glowing eyes dimmed but still burning with fury. "You think this ends here?" he rasped, his voice weaker but no less menacing. "You've only delayed your doom." Daniel clenched his fists, his heart pounding. They had come so far, risked so much, and still it wasn't enough. He glanced at Claire, who looked pale but determined, and then at Terran, whose expression was unreadable. There had to be another way. "Enough." Lyra's voice cut through the tension as she stepped into view, her uniform torn, but her stance unyielding. She raised her weapon, aiming directly at Sarlon. "You've caused enough destruction. This ends now." Sarlon sneered, taking a step closer despite the weapon trained on him. "You're brave, alien, but bravery won't save you." Before he could move further, Terran stepped forward, placing himself between Sarlon and the others. His frail body seemed insignificant compared to the towering figure before him, but his voice carried a weight that silenced everyone. "Sarlon," Terran said softly, his tone calm yet commanding. "You were once a leader, feared and respected. But look at you now. What do you fight for? Revenge? Power? Or just the remnants of a life long forgotten?" For a moment, Sarlon hesitated, his glowing eyes narrowing as he studied Terran. Then, with a growl, he lunged forward, his massive hand reaching out to strike. But Terran didn't flinch. Instead, he raised a small device he had been clutching, a relic from the prison, and activated it. A blinding flash of light erupted, enveloping Sarlon in a searing glow. When the light faded, Sarlon was gone, his massive form disintegrated into nothingness. The device clattered to the ground, its power spent. Terran swayed on his feet, his strength clearly drained. What was that?" Daniel asked, staring at the empty space where Sarlon had stood. "A failsafe," Terran replied weakly. "Made by the overseers to neutralize threats like him. I've carried it for years, waiting for the right moment." Lyra approached Terran, her expression filled with both respect and sorrow. "You've saved us all." Terran shook his head. "No, we've only delayed the inevitable. Earth's past is a scar that will never fully heal. But perhaps with time, humanity can learn from it." As the group returned to the Zorvath asterisk, the weight of everything they had experienced settled over them. The aliens offered to share their technology with humanity, hoping it would help prevent such threats in the future. Daniel accepted, knowing it was a chance to build a better world, but also aware of the responsibility that came with it. Claire stood beside him as they watched the ship prepare for departure. "Do you think we'll ever really understand all of this? Our history, I mean." Daniel sighed, gazing at the horizon. "Maybe not fully, but we have to try. For all the pain and darkness, there's also hope. And that's something worth fighting for." As the Zorvath asterisk ascended into the sky, leaving Earth behind, Daniel felt a strange sense of peace. The planet had been a death world, a prison, a place of suffering, but it was also home, and for the first time, he truly understood what that meant. In the distance, the sun began to rise, casting its golden light over the desert. It was a new day, full of questions, challenges, and possibilities. Whatever the future held, Daniel knew one thing for certain. They would face it together. As they entered the base, the air grew colder, carrying with it the faint scent of decay. The corridors were dark and cluttered with debris, making it difficult to navigate. Kel's scanner beeped intermittently, guiding them deeper into the complex. Every sound, the creak of metal, the distant drip of water, set their nerves on edge. Finally, they'd reached a large chamber at the heart of the base. The room was filled with makeshift weapons and tools, evidence that Sarlon had been preparing for war. In the center of the room stood the towering figure himself, his form both human and alien, his glowing eyes locking onto the intruders with cold calculation. "You shouldn't have come here," Sarlon said, his voice deep and resonant. "You've only delayed the inevitable." Lyra raised her weapon, her stance unwavering. "It ends now." Sarlon smirked, a cruel twist of his lips. "You think your little toys can stop me? I've survived millennia in stasis, endured horrors you can't imagine. You're nothing but insects." Before anyone could react, Sarlon lunged forward, his movements impossibly fast. Lyra fired her weapon, striking him squarely in the chest, but he barely flinched. He swatted her aside like she was weightless, sending her crashing into a wall. "Run," Terran shouted, grabbing Daniel and Claire and pulling them toward a side passage. "We need to split up." Claire hesitated, glancing back at Lyra. "We can't leave her." "She'll hold him off," Terran insisted. "Trust me." Reluctantly, the group obeyed, fleeing deeper into the base. Behind them, the sounds of battle echoed. Explosions, shouts, and the unmistakable roar of Sarlon's fury. They knew Lyra wouldn't give up easily, but they also knew time was running out. In the chaos, Daniel spotted an old control panel near the edge of the room. "This might work," he said, his mind racing. "If we overload the power grid, we can bring the whole place down on top of him." Terran nodded, understanding the plan immediately. "Do it, but hurry. He won't stay distracted for long." As Daniel worked frantically to reroute the power, Claire kept watch, her flashlight beam scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. Somewhere in the distance, Sarlon's roar grew louder, signaling his approach. "It's done," Daniel exclaimed, slamming his fist against the final switch. The lights overhead flickered violently, then surged with energy as the system began to overload. "Go," Terran shouted, shoving them toward the exit. Now, they ran as fast as they could, the ground trembling beneath their feet as the base collapsed behind them. Just as they reached the surface, a massive explosion rocked the area, sending a shockwave rippling through the desert. Panting and covered in dust, the group turned back to see the base reduced to rubble. For a moment, there was silence. Did we get him?" Claire asked, her voice trembling. No one answered. They didn't know, and until they did, none of them would feel safe. The Zorvath hovered silently above the desert, its engines humming softly as the team prepared for what lay ahead. Inside the ship, tension filled the air. Lyra stood at the center of the command deck, her glowing eyes fixed on a holographic map of the surrounding area. Kel's device had tracked Sarlon's movements to an abandoned military base several kilometers away, a place isolated enough for him to regroup and plan his next move. "We need to act quickly," Lyra said, her voice firm but calm. If Sarlon gained strength, he could become unstoppable. Daniel nodded, gripping the edge of the console. "He's dangerous, but we faced dangerous things before. We'll find a way to stop him." Claire crossed her arms, her expression uneasy. "And how exactly do you plan to do that?" "He's not like the others. He's smarter, stronger." "Which means we have to be smarter too," Daniel interrupted, his tone resolute. "We use everything we've learned about this place, about him, to outthink him." Terran stepped forward, his frail frame betraying none of the wisdom in his voice. Sarlon was a leader among the prisoners, feared even by his own kind, but he wasn't just powerful, he was cunning. If we confront him directly, we'll lose. We need to weaken him first. Lyra turned to Kale. Can you track his energy signature more precisely? Find where he's hiding within the base. Kale adjusted the settings on his scanner, the screen flickering as it processed data. I can narrow it down, but we'll need to get closer to pinpoint his location. Then we go in teams, Lyra decided. Kale and I will handle the tracking. Daniel, Claire, and Taryn, you stay close and watch our backs. Ethan, you remain here with the ship. If things go wrong, we'll need a way out. Ethan hesitated, clearly wanting to protest, but he nodded reluctantly. All right, but be careful. The group disembarked from the Zorvath*, their footsteps crunching against the dry desert ground as they approached the crumbling military base. The structure loomed ahead, its walls pockmarked with age and neglect. Faint lights flickered inside, suggesting someone, or something, had been using it recently. The group moved quickly through the labyrinth of tunnels, their footsteps echoing in the narrow passages. The collapse of the chamber had bought them time, but none of them felt safe. Every sound, the creak of metal, the drip of water, made them flinch, fearing it might be the first sign of pursuit. Daniel stayed close to Claire, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness as they navigated the maze. Behind them, Lyra and her team kept watch, their weapons ready for any threat. We need to get out of here, Claire muttered, her voice tight with anxiety. This place feels like it's closing in on us. Daniel nodded, glancing over his shoulder. We're almost there, just a little further. Taryn led the way, his knowledge of the facility guiding them toward an exit. He moved with surprising agility for someone who looked so frail, his tattered robes brushing against the walls as he turned corners. Occasionally, he paused to examine faded markings etched into the stone, ensuring they were heading in the right direction. As they approached what appeared to be a stairway leading upward, Kale stopped suddenly, his scanning device emitting a soft beep. "Wake," he said, his tone urgent. "There's movement ahead. Something, or someone, is blocking the path." Lyra stepped forward, raising her weapon. "Can you identify it?" Kale shook his head. "The readings are unclear. It could be another prisoner, or something else entirely." Taryn frowned, his weathered face lined with concern. "It's possible one of the forgotten ones escaped before we sealed the chamber. If that's true, we'll need to deal with it carefully." Ethan, who had been quiet since the earlier confrontation, spoke up. "What if we try reasoning with it again, like I did before?" Claire shot him a sharp look. "That didn't exactly work last time. Genius." "He's right," Taryn interrupted. "Violence isn't always the answer. Some of these beings still retain fragments of their humanity. If we can appeal to that, we might avoid a fight." Reluctantly, the group agreed to let Ethan attempt communication. They crept closer to the source of the movement, finding a shadowy figure standing at the base of the stairs. It was smaller than the other prisoners they had encountered, its form hunched and obscured by tattered cloth. Its glowing eyes flickered faintly in the dim light. "Hello," Ethan called out softly, raising his hands to show he wasn't armed. "We don't want to hurt you. We just want to leave this place." The figure tilted its head, studying him with an unreadable expression. For a moment, it seemed to consider his words. Then, without warning, it lunged forward, its movements swift and unpredictable. Lyra fired her weapon, striking the creature and forcing it back, but it recovered quickly, snarling in rage. "It's no use," Claire shouted, pulling Ethan away from the danger. "We can't reason with it." Taryn stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Enough. Let me handle this." Before anyone could stop him, Taryn approached the creature, speaking in a low, soothing tone. To everyone's surprise, the creature hesitated, its glowing eyes narrowing as it listened. Slowly, it lowered its guard, retreating into the shadows and disappearing from sight. "How did you do that?" Daniel asked, staring at Taryn in amazement. "I used to be like them," Taryn replied simply. "I know how they think." With the path clear, the group ascended the stairs, emerging into the cool night air of the desert. The alien ship stood nearby, its sleek surface gleaming under the moonlight. Exhausted but relieved, they made their way toward it, eager to leave the horrors of the underground prison behind. But as they reached the vessel, Cal's device emitted another alert. "Captain," he said, his voice tense, "one of the pods must have reopened. There's a signal coming from deep within the facility, moving fast." Lyra's expression hardened. "Xarlan." Terran nodded grimly. "He's free, and he won't stop until he finds us." Daniel clenched his fists, determination replacing his fear. "Then we'll stop him. Together." As the Zorvath prepared for takeoff, the group knew their fight was far from over. Somewhere in the darkness, Xarlan was coming. And when he arrived, the stakes would be higher than ever. The newly awakened prisoner lunged forward with startling speed, its twisted form moving in jerky but deliberate motions. Lyra fired her weapon, a burst of energy striking the creature and sending it stumbling back. But it recovered quickly, its glowing eyes locking onto her with unrelenting focus. Another pod cracked open nearby, releasing a second figure that joined the first. The room was filling with danger faster than they could react. "We can't fight them all," Claire shouted, her voice trembling as she backed away from the advancing creatures. Daniel grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the far side of the chamber. "Stay close to the others. We need to hold them off until we figure out what to do." Kale frantically worked at a control panel near the entrance, trying to activate the room's security systems. "If I can restore power to the containment fields, we might be able to trap them inside." Terran moved to help him, his hand steady despite the chaos around them. "Hurry," he urged. "These ones are just the beginning. If Xarlan wakes up," he didn't need to finish. Everyone knew what was at stake. The massive pod holding Xarlan still glowed faintly, its systems humming louder with each passing second. It wouldn't stay sealed for long. Lyra and her team formed a defensive line, their weapons firing in controlled bursts to keep the creatures at bay. Each shot seemed to slow them down, but not enough to stop them completely. The prisoners were relentless, their movements erratic yet purposeful, as if driven by an ancient rage. Ethan, who had been standing near the edge of the group, suddenly stepped forward. "Wait, maybe we can talk to them. They're intelligent, right? Not just animals." Claire spun around, glaring at him. "Are you crazy? They'll tear us apart." "No," Terran interjected, his voice calm but firm. "He's right. Some of them still have traces of their former selves. If we can appeal to that, we might buy ourselves time." Before anyone could stop him, Ethan approached one of the creatures, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "We're not your enemies," he said slowly, his voice shaking but clear. "You don't have to fight us." For a moment, the creature hesitated, its glowing eyes narrowing as it studied him. Then, with a guttural growl, it lunged again, forcing Ethan to stumble backward. Lyra fired another shot, pushing the creature back once more. "It's no use," she snapped. "They're too far gone." But Terran wasn't ready to give up. He turned to Daniel, his expression urgent. "There's something else we can try. A failsafe built into the system. If we activate it, we can shut down the entire facility, including the pods. But it will collapse this section of the prison. We won't have much time to escape." Daniel nodded, his mind racing. "Do it. We'll cover you." As Cal and Terran worked together to access the failsafe, the rest of the group focused on holding the line. More pods began to crack open, spilling mist and awakening additional prisoners. The chamber was becoming a battlefield, the air thick with tension and fear. Finally, Kale let out a triumphant shout. "Got it. Initiating shutdown sequence now." The hum of the pods grew louder, then abruptly cut off as the glowing panels dimmed. One by one, the active pods sealed themselves shut, trapping the prisoners inside. Even the massive pod containing Xarlan powered down, its glass panel darkening as the systems went offline. "We did it," Ethan exclaimed, relief washing over his face. Not yet, Lyra warned, her eyes scanning the room. This place is unstable. We need to leave now. The group wasted no time, sprinting toward the exit as alarms blared overhead. The walls groaned under the strain, cracks forming and spreading rapidly. Behind them, the chamber began to collapse, chunks of debris falling from the ceiling. They barely made it through the doorway before the entire room caved in, sealing the prisoners. And Xarlan, inside, panting and covered in dust, the group paused to catch their breath. "We stopped them. For now," Terran said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "But this isn't over. Sooner or later, someone will try to reopen those pods." Lyra met his gaze, her expression resolute. "Then we'll make sure they never get the chance." As they regrouped and prepared to head back to the surface, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that they had only delayed the inevitable. Somewhere deep underground, Xarlan waited, dormant but not defeated. And when he awoke, the consequences would be unimaginable. The group worked tirelessly to reinforce the chamber, their movements hurried but precise. Terran directed them with quiet authority, pointing out weak points in the ancient structure that needed extra support. Lyra and her team used advanced tools from the Zorvath to weld metal beams into place, while Daniel and Claire hauled debris to block smaller gaps in the walls. The air was thick with tension, each person aware of the danger lurking just beyond their makeshift barriers. As they worked, Kale remained focused on his scanning device, monitoring the surrounding area for any signs of movement. Suddenly, the screen emitted a sharp beep, causing him to freeze. "We have a problem," he said, his voice tight with urgency. "There's activity nearby, multiple signals. They're heading this way." Claire dropped the piece of rubble she had been carrying, her face pale. "How many?" Kale hesitated, glancing at the readings. "Too many to fight." Lyra stepped forward, her weapon drawn. "We need to evacuate. Now." Terran shook his head, his expression grim. "It's too late. They've already found us." Before anyone could react, a loud crash echoed through the corridor outside. The reinforced door shuddered under the force of something slamming against it. Dust rained from the ceiling as the impact came again and again. Each blow felt heavier, more determined. "We can't stay here," Claire shouted, panic creeping into her voice. Daniel grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the far end of the chamber. "Look for another exit. There has to be one." Terran nodded, gesturing toward a narrow passage, partially hidden behind a stack of crates. "That leads to an older section of the facility. It might buy us some time." Without hesitation, the group moved toward the passage, dragging what equipment they could carry. As they slipped through the opening, the main door finally gave way with a deafening roar. A swarm of twisted figures poured into the chamber, their glowing eyes scanning the area with predatory intensity. Once inside the passage, Lyra ordered her team to set up a temporary barrier using portable energy shields. The devices hummed softly as they activated, creating a flickering wall of light that blocked the creature's path. "For now. This won't hold them forever," Lyra warned, her voice low. "We need to keep moving." The passage twisted and turned, descending deeper into the labyrinth. The air grew colder, dampening their skin and making every breath feel heavy. Along the way, Kale stopped to examine a series of panels embedded in the walls. His fingers danced over the controls, and a holographic display sprang to life, showing a map of the facility. "There's another chamber ahead," he said, pointing to a large room marked on the map. "It contains cryogenic pods. Some are still active." Daniel frowned. "Active? You mean there are prisoners still frozen in there?" "Yes," Kale replied. "But if we don't secure them, the Forgotten Ones will find a way to release them. And that could make things much worse." Terran's face darkened. "Xarlan is among them. He's been in stasis since the prison collapsed. If he awakens," he didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone understood the stakes. When they reached the chamber, The sight was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. Rows upon rows of cryogenic pods lined the walls, their surfaces frosted with ice. Most were dark and empty, but a few glowed faintly, indicating life within. One pod stood out, a massive container at the center of the room, its glass panel fogged but showing the outline of a towering figure inside. "That's him," Terran whispered, his voice barely audible. "Sarlin." Claire stared at the pod, her hands trembling. "Can we destroy it? Break the glass or something?" Kale shook his head. "The technology is too advanced. Any attempt to damage it could trigger a catastrophic failure, releasing all the pods at once." Lyra clenched her fists, frustration evident on her face. "Then we seal this room. We fortify it and hope it holds." But before they could act, a low hum filled the air. The lights in the chamber flickered, and several of the pods began to power up. Claire gasped as one of the smaller containers cracked open, spilling mist into the room. A figure slowly emerged, its form hunched and distorted, its eyes glowing with malevolent intelligence. "It's starting," Terran muttered, stepping back. "They're waking up." Lyra raised her weapon, aiming at the newly awakened prisoner. "Everyone, prepare for a fight." Daniel glanced around the room, his mind racing. They were outnumbered and outmatched. But as he looked at the others, human and alien alike, he realized they had no choice. They would stand together, or they would fall apart. Terran's voice was hoarse but steady as he began to speak. He gestured for the group to sit on the cracked floor of the chamber, his movements slow and deliberate. The humans and aliens exchanged cautious glances before complying, their eyes never leaving the mysterious figure. "Our people were not always like this," Terran said, his gaze distant as if recalling a memory buried deep in time. "Long ago, we were brought here against our will. This planet, your Earth, was chosen as a dumping ground for the galaxy's worst criminals. Species from across the stars were exiled here, locked away in these prisons to die." Daniel leaned forward, his curiosity burning brighter with every word. "But how did you survive? And why do you look human?" Terran's lips curved into a faint, sad smile. "Because I am human, or at least I once was. My ancestors were among the first prisoners sent here. Over generations, we adapted to this harsh world. We learned to live without sunlight, without food, without hope. But survival came at a cost. Many of us became twisted, changed by the darkness, both inside and out." Claire frowned, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "So those creatures we saw earlier, are they what happens when people stay down here too long?" Terran nodded grimly. "Yes, some lost their minds. Others evolved in ways no one could have predicted. They became something else entirely, dangerous, unpredictable." Lyra stepped closer, her glowing eyes fixed on Terran. "You mentioned your kind. Are there others like you still alive?" "There are tribes," Terran replied. "Small groups scattered across the planet. We avoid the surface, staying hidden in places like this where the old ones cannot find us. But even then, we live in fear, the forgotten ones, the ones who change. They hunt us whenever they can." Ethan, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "Why don't you leave? Go above ground. Surely it's safer there." Terran shook his head. "The surface is dangerous in its own way. It belongs to the new ones, your kind. Humans who have no memory of what came before. If they found us, they would kill us or lock us away again. We cannot risk it." Daniel felt a pang of guilt. He had spent years studying ancient civilizations, yet he had never imagined that humanity itself might be descended from exiles. "Is it true?" he asked softly. "Are all humans descendants of prisoners?" Terran hesitated, then nodded. "Most likely, yes. When the overseers abandoned this world, some of us escaped the prisons and made our way to the surface. Over time, we rebuilt, forgot our past, and started anew. You are the result of that forgetting." The weight of Terran's words settled heavily on the group. Claire shifted uncomfortably, breaking the silence. If what you're saying is true, then why tell us now? After all this time? Because you've awakened something, Terran said, his tone grave. By digging into the past, you've disturbed the balance. The forgotten ones will rise again, and when they do, no one will be safe. Not you, not us, not anyone. Lyra exchanged a glance with Kale, who was quietly analyzing the pods around them. We need to secure this facility, she said firmly. If these prisoners pose a threat, we can't leave them unchecked. Terran raised a hand, stopping her. You must tread carefully. Not all of them are mindless beasts. Some are cunning, intelligent, and far more dangerous than you realize. One in particular, Zarlan. He was a leader among the prisoners, feared even by his own kind. If he awakens, none of us will survive. The name sent a chill through the room. Daniel glanced at the pods, imagining the horrors that might lie within. Can we destroy them? He asked. Make sure they never wake up. Terran shook his head. The technology is too advanced. Even if you tried, it would take time. Time we may not have. Lyra straightened, her expression resolute. Then we'll do what we can, starting with sealing off this chamber. Kale, begin scanning for weaknesses in the structure. We'll reinforce it as best we can. As Kale moved to work, Daniel turned back to Terran. Will you help us? Your knowledge could make all the difference. Terran hesitated, his weathered face lined with doubt. Finally, he nodded. I will help. But know this, if we fail, the consequences will be catastrophic. With Terran's guidance, the group worked quickly to fortify the chamber, using tools provided by the aliens and materials scavenged from the facility. As they labored, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that they were only delaying the inevitable. Somewhere in the depths of the prison, something stirred, a presence waiting to break free. The sound of footsteps echoed through the narrow corridor, each step deliberate and heavy. The group froze, their flashlights trembling as they scanned the darkness ahead. Daniel's breath quickened, his hand gripping the flashlight so tightly his knuckles turned white. Claire instinctively moved closer to him, her eyes darting nervously between the shadows. Even Lyra and her team seemed tense, their weapons raised and ready. Who's there? Lyra called out, her voice firm but cautious. The universal translator crackled as it converted her words into English. There was no response, only the steady rhythm of approaching steps. Kale adjusted the settings on his scanning device, its screen glowing faintly in the dim light. There's someone, ahead, he whispered. But the readings are unusual. It doesn't match any known species. Before anyone could react, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was tall and gaunt, its skin gray and cracked like old stone. Its eyes glowed faintly, piercing through the darkness with an unsettling intensity. The creature's movements were slow but deliberate, as if it had all the time in the world. Daniel took an involuntary step back, his heart pounding. What is that thing? Lyra stepped forward, raising her weapon but keeping her tone calm. We mean no harm. We're here to learn about this place. The creature tilted its head, studying them with an expression that was neither friendly nor hostile. Then, without warning, it lunged at the group with startling speed. Chaos erupted as everyone scrambled to defend themselves. Lyra fired her weapon, a burst of energy striking the creature and sending it stumbling backward. But it recovered quickly, its glowing eyes narrowing in anger. Fall back, Lyra shouted, her voice cutting through the panic. The group retreated down the corridor, their footsteps echoing loudly as they fled. The creature gave chase, its movements unnervingly swift, despite its frail appearance. As they ran, Daniel noticed a side passage branching off from the main corridor. This way, he yelled, veering sharply into the narrow opening. The others followed, squeezing through just as the creature reached the intersection. It hesitated for a moment, its glowing eyes scanning the area before it continued down the main path. Once they were safely hidden, the group caught their breath, their faces pale with fear. What was that? Claire whispered, her voice shaking. It looked wrong. It's one of the forgotten ones, Cale said grimly. A survivor, changed by centuries, or millennia, of isolation. Daniel frowned, trying to process what he had seen. If that's what they've become, then we need to be careful. There could be more of them. Lyra nodded, her expression hardening. We'll proceed with caution, but we can't leave now. This facility holds answers we need. The group pressed on, moving deeper into the labyrinth of tunnels. Along the way, they found more evidence of the prison's dark past. Faded murals depicted scenes of violence and despair, prisoners fighting among themselves, overseers wielding cruel tools of control. It was a grim reminder of Earth's forgotten history. Eventually, they stumbled upon a chamber filled with strange pods, resembling cryogenic containers. Most were empty or broken, but a few still contained figures suspended in a state of stasis. Their forms were twisted and unnatural, hinting at the horrors they might unleash if awakened. Ethan, the young anthropologist who had joined Daniel's team, approached one of the pods cautiously. "These must be the prisoners," he murmured, his voice filled with awe. "They've been here for so long." Claire grabbed his arm, pulling him back. "Don't touch anything. Do you want to wake them up?" Before Ethan could respond, a low rumble shook the chamber. Dust fell from the ceiling as the walls creaked ominously. "This place isn't stable," Cale warned. "We need to leave now." But as they turned to go, another figure appeared in the doorway. Unlike the first creature, this one was smaller and more humanoid, its features obscured by tattered robes. It raised a hand, gesturing for them to stop. "Wait," it rasped, its voice surprisingly clear. "You are not our enemies." Daniel exchanged a wary glance with Lyra. "Who are you?" he asked. The figure lowered its hood, revealing a face that was weathered but unmistakably human. "I am Terran," it said, "one of the last of my kind, and I have much to tell you." For a moment, no one spoke. Then Daniel stepped forward, his curiosity outweighing his fear. "Tell us," he said. "We're listening." Daniel leaned in, studying the map. Several dots clustered around remote areas, deserts, mountains, and dense forests. One location stood out, a region deep in the Nevada desert, not far from their current position. "That's where we should start," he said, pointing to the nearest dot. "It's close, and we already know there's activity here." Lyra considered this for a moment, then gave a decisive nod. "We'll investigate that site first, but we must prepare for anything. These beings may not welcome visitors." As the group packed up their equipment and prepared to leave, Claire pulled Daniel aside. "Are you sure about this?" she asked quietly. "This feels like a bad idea. We're walking into the unknown with aliens we barely know. What if something goes wrong?" "I get it," Daniel replied, his tone softer. "I'm scared too. But think about it. If there really are survivors, they could hold the key to understanding our past. Isn't that worth the risk?" Claire sighed, glancing back at the alien ship. "Fine. But I'm keeping an eye on them. And on you." The journey to the site took several hours. They traveled in a combination of vehicles, the humans in their dusty jeeps, and the aliens in sleek hovercrafts that glided effortlessly over the uneven terrain. As they approached the coordinates, the landscape grew increasingly desolate. The ground was cracked and dry, dotted with jagged rocks and twisted shrubs. It was the kind of place where nothing should live, but something clearly did. When they arrived, Cale scanned the area with his device. The readings confirmed the presence of underground structures, buried just beneath the surface. "There," he said, pointing to a rocky outcrop. "The entrance is likely hidden under there." The team worked together to clear away the debris, revealing a heavy metal door covered in rust and dirt. It looked ancient, yet sturdy enough to withstand centuries of neglect. Daniel ran his hand over the surface, feeling the faint grooves of symbols carved into the metal. They matched the ones on the artifacts they had found earlier. "This is it," he said, his voice tinged with both excitement and unease. "Let's see what's inside." Lyra stepped forward, signaling for her team to take positions. "Stay alert," she warned. "We don't know what we'll find." With Cal's help, they managed to pry the door open, revealing a dark passageway leading downward. The air that wafted out was stale and cold, carrying with it the faint scent of decay. Daniel grabbed a flashlight and peered inside, his heart pounding. Shadows danced on the walls, hinting at corridors that stretched far beyond what the light could reach. "Ready?" Lyra asked, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. Daniel nodded, though his stomach churned with apprehension. "Let's go." One by one, they descended into the darkness, leaving the harsh sunlight of the desert behind. Each step echoed ominously, a reminder of the unknown dangers that might await them. As they ventured deeper, the walls began to change. Smooth stone gave way to metallic panels, etched with the same strange symbols they had seen before. It was as if the facility had been built in layers, each one older than the last. Suddenly, Cal stopped, holding up a hand. "Wait," he whispered. "There's movement ahead." Everyone froze, straining to hear. At first, there was only silence. Then, faintly, came the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, and coming closer. The warning etched into the artifact. "Beware the Forgotten Ones," hung heavily in the air. Daniel stared at the inscription, his mind racing with possibilities. What did it mean? Who were the Forgotten Ones? He glanced at Captain Lyra, hoping for answers, but her expression was unreadable. If anything, she seemed even more troubled than before. Cal, the alien scientist, continued to analyze the artifact, his fingers moving quickly over the glowing screen of his device. "These symbols," he said after a moment, "they refer to prisoners who were left behind when the penal colony was abandoned. Some may have survived." "Survived?" Claire blurted out, her voice sharp with disbelief. How could anyone survive being locked up underground for thousands, or millions, of years? "It's possible," Cal replied calmly. "Some species are resilient. They adapt. Over time, they evolve. These survivors would no longer be what they once were." Daniel felt a cold shiver run down his spine. The idea of ancient prisoners evolving into something entirely new and potentially dangerous was unsettling. "If they're still out there," he said slowly, "then we need to find them. Before they find us." Lyra nodded. "Agreed. But we must proceed carefully. If these beings are as dangerous as the records suggest, we cannot risk provoking them." Claire crossed her arms, her skepticism evident. "And how exactly do you plan to find them?" "This planet is huge. We don't even know where to start." Cal turned his tablet toward the group, showing a map of Earth overlaid with glowing dots. "These are energy signatures detected by our sensors. They match the patterns of the containment facilities we've identified. If any prisoners survived, they would likely be near these locations." The alien spacecraft sat silently in the desert, its sleek surface gleaming under the fading sunlight. Daniel Carter and his team stood frozen, their eyes wide with a mix of fear and awe. The ship was unlike anything they had ever seen, smooth, metallic, and impossibly advanced. For a moment, no one moved. Then a low hum filled the air as a hatch on the side of the vessel slid open. A group of figures emerged, their forms tall and slender, their skin shimmering faintly in hues of silver and blue. Daniel instinctively stepped forward, his curiosity overpowering his fear. "Who, or what are you?" he called out, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. One of the aliens, taller than the others and wearing what appeared to be some kind of insignia on her chest, raised a hand. A small device on her wrist lit up, and a mechanical voice spoke in clear, if slightly robotic, English. "We mean no harm. We are explorers, seeking knowledge." Claire grabbed Daniel's arm, pulling him back. "Are you crazy? You don't know what they want," she hissed under her breath. But Daniel ignored her, taking another cautious step toward the aliens. "Knowledge about what?" he asked. The alien leader gestured toward the artifacts scattered around the dig site. "About these objects, and about your planet." She paused, her glowing eyes scanning the area. "You have uncovered traces of something ancient. Something important." Daniel exchanged a glance with Claire, who still looked skeptical but didn't object further. He turned back to the alien. "My name is Daniel. This is my assistant, Claire. We're archaeologists. We've been studying these artifacts for weeks, but we can't make sense of them." The alien nodded slowly. "I am Captain Lyra." "This is Kale," she said, pointing to a shorter alien holding a tablet-like device. "We believe these artifacts are connected to Earth's past, a past that has been hidden for millennia." Kale stepped forward, holding up his tablet. On its screen was an image of intricate underground structures, similar to the ones Daniel and his team had been uncovering. "These were prisons," Kale explained through the translator. "Your planet was once used as a penal colony. Dangerous beings were exiled here and left to die." The words hit Daniel like a punch to the gut. He stared at the screen, trying to process what he was hearing. "A prison? For who?" "For many species," Lyra replied, "including yours." Claire gasped, stepping back involuntarily. "That's impossible. Humans evolved here. This is our home." "Perhaps," Lyra said, tilting her head slightly. "But your history is more complex than you realize. If we work together, we may uncover the truth." Daniel hesitated, glancing at Claire. Her expression was a mixture of disbelief and suspicion, but he could see the flicker of curiosity in her eyes. Finally, he nodded. "All right, we'll help you. But we need to know everything you discover." Lyra gave a slight bow, a gesture that seemed respectful, or perhaps ceremonial. "Agreed." Over the next hour, the humans and aliens worked side by side, examining the artifacts and comparing notes. Kale used his advanced technology to scan the metal fragments, revealing hidden patterns and symbols that had been invisible to the naked eye. Meanwhile, Daniel shared what little they had learned so far, explaining how the pieces fit into the larger puzzle of Earth's mysterious past. As night fell, the temperature dropped sharply, and the team set up portable lights to continue their work. Claire remained wary, keeping her distance from the aliens while observing their every move. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to their story than they were letting on. At one point, she approached Daniel, lowering her voice. "Do you really trust them? What if they're here to take over? Or worse?" Daniel sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "I don't know, Claire. But think about it. If they wanted to hurt us, they could have done it already. They're offering us answers, and I'm not going to turn that down." Claire frowned but said nothing. Deep down, she knew he was right, but her instincts told her to stay alert. Something about the situation felt off. As the hours passed, the collaboration began to yield results. Kale managed to partially decode one of the inscriptions, revealing the warning etched into the metal. Asterisk, beware the forgotten ones. Asterisk. The message sent a chill through everyone present, human and alien alike. "What does that mean?" Daniel asked, looking at Lyra. Her expression darkened. "It means we may not be the only ones interested in Earth's secrets." In the vast silence of space, the alien exploration vessel Zorvath drifted silently through the void. Its sleek, metallic surface shimmered faintly under the light of a distant star. Inside, Captain Lyra stood on the command deck, her sharp eyes fixed on the holographic display hovering before her. The screen showed a swirling blue planet, its surface streaked with clouds and vibrant greens and browns. It was Earth, a world her species had long dismissed as uninhabited by advanced life, but something about it had caught their attention. The ship's sensors had picked up strange signals emanating from Earth's surface, patterns that didn't match natural phenomena. At first, the crew thought it might be interference or some kind of cosmic anomaly. But as they analyzed the data further, the truth became clear. These were artificial signals, remnants of technology buried deep beneath the planet's crust. Lyra turned to Kale, her lead scientist, who stood nearby, his face illuminated by the glow of his tablet. "What do you make of this?" she asked, her voice calm but tinged with curiosity. Kale adjusted the settings on his device, scrolling through lines of data. "It's not just random debris," he replied. "These are structures, massive ones, and based on the readings, they're ancient, thousands, maybe millions of years old." Lyra raised an eyebrow. "Structures on a supposedly barren planet?" Kale nodded. "Yes, and there's more." He tapped a few commands, and the hologram shifted, revealing detailed scans of the planet's subsurface. Deep underground, intricate networks of tunnels and chambers stretched across entire continents. Some areas even resembled containment cells, designed to hold something, or someone, against their will. "This doesn't look like ordinary architecture," Lyra murmured. "It looks like a prison." Her words hung in the air, heavy with implication. If Earth had once been used as a penal colony, then its history was far darker than anyone could have imagined. The thought sent a chill down her spine. Who, or what, had been imprisoned here? And why? Determined to find answers, Lyra ordered the ship to move closer to Earth's atmosphere. As they descended, the view outside the windows grew clearer. Rolling mountains, endless oceans, and sprawling forests filled their vision. It was beautiful, yet haunting. Beneath its serene exterior lay secrets waiting to be uncovered. Meanwhile, on Earth's surface, archaeologist Daniel Carter was leading a team of researchers in the scorching heat of the Nevada desert. For weeks, they had been excavating a site where unusual artifacts had been discovered buried under layers of sand and rock. The objects were made of an unknown metal, etched with strange symbols that no one could decipher. Daniel knelt beside one of the fragments, running his fingers over its smooth surface. "Any luck with translation?" He called out to his assistant, Claire Bennett, who was sitting nearby with a laptop. Claire shook her head. "Nothing yet. These markings don't match any known language. Not even close." Daniel frowned. Whoever had created these objects had left behind a puzzle that defied explanation. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were onto something big, something groundbreaking. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the dig site, a sudden rumble echoed through the air. Everyone froze, looking around in confusion. Then, without warning, a massive spacecraft descended from the sky, its engines roaring like thunder. Dust swirled violently as the craft landed several hundred meters away. "What the hell is that?" Claire exclaimed, shielding her eyes from the wind. Daniel stared at the ship, his heart pounding. He didn't know what it was, but one thing was certain: it wasn't human.